I'll take it back even further. I was a kid in the Caribbean, and the island PC tech was working on our business's computer. And at 8 years old, I saw all these computer parts, and I just got intrigued. I tried to use the word safely rather than securely, because when you do it safely, they understand that. They understand what human safety is. I use the word coaching because I come in and rather than saying you need to do this, you need to do that, I understand that what you're trying to achieve and work with them to achieve a maturity and a continuous process improvement to have more resiliency in their organization. You're never going to achieve big, massive jumps in culture, in process, in anything. So what you have to do is look at incremental ways that you can do it. If it takes you 6 months to make a change because you want to do everything in one big bang and you get compromised or there's a vulnerability, now you're taking 6 months to be able to respond to that. On the other hand, if you can launch updates and changes in your code as you need on a daily, weekly basis, some shorter sprints, then you're able to react quicker when there's a known vulnerability.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode, Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. Are you ready to take your business's cybersecurity to the next level? Well, meet Christoph Foulon, a seasoned cybersecurity strategist and the mastermind behind CPF Coaching LLC. With over 15 years of experience as a vCISO and information security manager, Christoph has a unique approach that blends cutting-edge technology with a human-centric coaching to mitigate risks and enhance overall business resiliency. So in this episode, we're going to dive into real-world examples of how his coaching transforms organizations, the crucial role of process improvement, and how his dual experience as a vCISO and educator shapes his methods. So stay tuned to discover how you can fortify your business against cyber threats and achieve new heights of security and efficiency. So welcome to the show.
What an intro.
Yeah, you've got quite a background, actually. So why don't we just jump right in? What sparked your initial interest in cybersecurity?
I'll take it back even further. I was a kid in the Caribbean, and the island PC tech was working on our business's computer. And at 8 years old, I saw all these computer parts, and I just got intrigued. That got me started. As Napster started to take off back in the day, everyone started getting viruses, and they needed a way to figure out how to remove them. And I was the one that was interested in helping them. So I started to figure out ways to change behaviors behind the initial infection. And that started me down the path of cybersecurity, because most of the times it's the behavior in the person that causes them to do something that causes the initial breach. And that could be a person clicking a link, that could be a developer just taking a whole library of code and not understanding the whole aspect of it. Or it could be someone trying to implement a technology process that really breaks the business process.
Yeah, and then they break things.
It's the definite, who's breaking it? Is it the security person trying to implement security? Or is it the business person just trying to deliver business results, generate profit, make a sale? So you really have to figure out, when working with the business, what drives their revenue, and then how can you enable them to do it? And I try to use the word safely rather than securely, because when you do it safely, they understand that. They understand what human safety is, what psychological safety is. But if you put it in the sense of business safety, then they start to understand that better.
So you founded CPF Coaching. What services do you offer?
I offer vCISO and security consulting services. I would come in, help an organization assess their business processes, or help them with maturing their security program in a safe and effective way. A recent example is I was working with a healthcare company. Their vendor was requiring them to improve the maturity of their program, and I was helping them with that. So again, back to how can they make more money? They had to bring on a bigger payer to help supplement their revenue and bring in additional income streams. There were requirements from that vendor for them to be more mature in their program. I was helping them improve their maturity.
What are some of the common challenges that businesses face with cybersecurity today? And how does your coaching help them address that?
I use the word coaching because I come in and rather than saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, I understand that what you're trying to achieve and work with them to achieve a maturity and a continuous process improvement to have more resiliency in their organization. So some of the common factors, let's take security and awareness training. Most companies think if they do a 1 hour training once a year, that will achieve the security awareness that you're looking for. But that drives hesitancy for someone to invest, as we're talking about 60 minutes of time to watch something, and then they have to drag through it and they put it off all the time. But if you break that into chunks and present it in a way that they can take back to their personal life, they then take that security awareness, bring it into their personal sphere, and then it improves both their own safety awareness and the business's safety awareness. That's just one example.
No, it makes sense because a lot of times you end up feeling like you have to coach the person on how to handle it. I've always been one who I like to get a customer, keep a customer. And the one way to keep them happy is to not continually go back to the well and charge them more and more money. And so if you can teach them how to handle some of the basics in a better way, then why not? I think that's actually a pretty brilliant approach on your part, especially with cybersecurity, because really, if you think about it, there are some cybersecurity landscape changes so rapidly, and there's always issues that are revealed because the hacker tries something new and it works. But that leads me to, what trends do you see emerging in the cybersecurity landscape that businesses must be aware of?
I would say ransomware is definitely something to be aware about. There's threat actors out there that are looking to compromise your business data, your employees' data, your customers' data. And one of the things that you have to do is be able to have a resilient business process around that and test that you can restore your systems in an effective way if you do have a ransomware situation. And this involves more than just creating backups. This involves testing your backups, ensuring that they work. You as a CTO look at this from an operations standpoint, and me as a security person, I look at this as a resilience standpoint. And we're both trying to achieve the same thing: business availability. Look at those as competing priorities from operations to security, but they're really the same thing. We're trying to achieve that business resiliency in the long run.
Exactly. What role does process improvement play in effective cybersecurity management?
You're never going to achieve big, massive jumps in culture, in process, in anything. So what you have to do is look at incremental ways that you can do it. And then that will make you more agile and more resilient to the changes in the landscape. If it takes you 6 months to make a change because you want to do everything in one big bang and you get compromised or there's a vulnerability, now you're taking 6 months to be able to respond to that. On the other hand, if you can launch updates and changes in your code as you need on a daily, weekly basis, some shorter sprints, then you're able to react quicker when there's a known vulnerability that threat actors are looking to compromise that might be in your environment.
So How do you stay updated though? Like with all the latest developments and threats, how do you stay updated with all that?
Google. I hate to make it that simple, but there's RSS feeds that you can subscribe to. One of the providers that I love is Feedly. They really help aggregate a lot of the feeds. And then if you subscribe to their program, they actually use machine learning and AI to bubble up the important aspects of what you're looking for. So if you're looking for cyber vulnerabilities, they'll scan all the articles from the providers that you're looking for, and then they'll aggregate based on a CSS score or something like that and say, hey, these are the highest risk vulnerabilities that are being discussed in the threat landscape today. And if you look at that and, oh, that's the system I'm using right away, that's something that you need to take action on.
Yeah, I expected you to say something similar to that. I actually, it's interesting that you mentioned Feedly because I've used them for years. And it's literally how I stay up to date on the latest coding trends and stuff because I used to be a software developer and then I rose up through the ranks, became a CTO, and I've been a CTO for 2 decades. I offer virtual CTO work. I coach tech executives, but I have a company that we do NetSuite development. So number one, I got to stay up to date on what's going on with NetSuite, security issues, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera. And then number two, just what are the latest trends in development tools? Like what's out there? And since I don't actually actively code, it doesn't stay front of mind. So I just subscribe to some RSS feeds that keep me up to date. One of them today told me about Ascension is a healthcare network. They've
Mm-hmm.
been hit with some kind of cybersecurity incident that's affecting hospital operations right now. Hopefully it's not a ransomware attack because then that would be pretty awful.
Yeah,
Those have been getting horrible. Like I know here in Vegas, they had the big MGM hack, they had the Caesars hack. And anytime any of the hotels here these days have a problem with their internal system and so registration is slow, the rumors start flying that, oh, they got hacked again. It's really crazy, but I think that's a great way to stay updated. And I give that advice to the listeners is, if there's a topic that you want to stay on top of and you don't have the time to continually do the research, and you actually shouldn't even waste your time continually doing the research, you look into these RSS feed readers. They help you organize them into folders. I highly recommend that. I'm glad you mentioned it because it's a powerful tool for aggregating information into one place. And then you can scan through and go, I don't need to know about that. And like you said, if there's some software you use mentioned in a cyber breach issue, you better pay attention.
absolutely. And so if you're a larger organization, you might have an EDR vendor or a threat intelligence vendor that's going to provide that information to your team. But you as a leader, you should be keeping up on this. They might be getting those alerts directly, but you want to make sure that they're on top of it. That way you can continue to grow your career as well by keeping up with that and not staying behind the trends.
Yeah, totally true. So I understand from my research that you're also an adjunct professor.
Yes, I used to teach. I had to take a step back from that because health reasons, you got to prioritize your well-being in order to stay successful in your career. So I had to
Amen.
step back, but I love teaching. So one of the other things that I do outside of adjunct professor is I support a nonprofit organization called Full Cyber Human Initiative. And what they do is they provide transitioning veterans and others a holistic approach to learning cybersecurity. It uses an assessment initially called Cyber Nights, which is free for individuals. We use that as a foundation for veterans to come in and assess where they have skills and competencies, what areas they might be interested in, and then provide them with over 340 hours of community available training. So they don't have to pay for anything. We provide them with the pathway to develop their cybersecurity career. There's all these headlines out there of how deficient the cybersecurity industry is with professionals. And sometimes it's a cost prohibitive aspect to go out and spend money on a training that you don't even know that you like or that you're going to be successful in. By providing this holistic training of free training from, say, cloud security vendors, from cloud software providers like Azure and AWS, they get to dip their toes in the different aspects of technology and see where you're really interested in. so that they can have a successful career in cybersecurity and not be feeling like they're a rat running on a treadmill trying to keep up.
Rattle. So what's the most unusual cybersecurity threat or breach that you've encountered in your career?
I think some of them really go back to not having an understanding of the vulnerabilities within your supply chain. As a CTO, oftentimes you're going to integrate technology from a variety of different vendors. But if you don't understand the supply chain that feed into those vendors, you're going to be inheriting risk that you're not aware about. So a great example of that is the SolarWinds vulnerability. You have a software platform that you're using to trust for your supply chain, and then they get hacked. But this happens more than people think. That was just one of the most commonly bigger breaches that were out there that people understand. So it's something to be aware about how that supply chain will affect the risk within your organization.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just had a gentleman on the show who he runs an SAP company, and one of the reasons they're successful is they're very customer centric. We were talking about how when I was an active CTO working physically in a brick and mortar building, a lot of vendors kept me awake at night, just worrying about, are they doing the right things? Are they making sure they're paying attention to the security and the safety of my data? And it kept me awake at night. With his company, it was nice to hear that one CIO told him that he sleeps better at night knowing that they're using that company because they care about their customers. They're never going to just leave their customer hanging. I think that's huge, right? If you're not customer centric, then why are you here? Why are you here trying to help people? So that's just my thoughts.
I love that you brought up the fact that understanding where your data lives and who's looking over it, because it's a shared responsibility model when you're using a SaaS provider or you're outsourcing some of your business process to another organization. You need to understand what data they're holding so that if something does happen to them, you know how to respond to that, what sort of breach you might have. It might be maybe just a mailing list, or it could be your entire customer list and all their details. So that's something to be aware about when you use external services, that you understand what data you're holding, how critical it is to your organization, so that when you do create an incident response plan, you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, when I do new consulting projects, I can always tell how it's going to go based on the rules given to me for access and things of that nature. If they just hand over the keys to the kingdom, I know I'm going to have some struggles because they're not thinking in the way that I want them to think. If you could implement just one universal cybersecurity policy across every organization, what would it be?
I would start with data classification, because you really need to understand what data is living where and how critical it is to your organization. Once you can classify what data is critical, non-critical, then you can start to build protection around the systems that are mission critical to your organization.
So, what's a common misconception that people have about cybersecurity that you'd just love to debunk?
That it's hard. It doesn't have to be hard. So take, for example, password management and multi-factor authentication. It sounds like it's really hard, but it could be really easy to implement. You can use a password manager. You can share the ability for them to use the password manager in their personal life with a different security vault than the organization. And by sharing this access to this great tool, you allow them to create different username and passwords for their personal life than their business life. Because one of the common things that happen is they will create a common password that they use across all of their virtual identities. So if their Yahoo account gets breached, now the threat actors can go, oh, okay, this username and password combination, let me go try it at their current organization. And oftentimes, if you're not using some sort of complex password, then it's going to be the same one that they use over and over. The next thing, multi-factor authentication. Yes, the easiest way is to send something to the phone, but that is unfortunately one of the easier ways to break. So, if you're using a password manager, use one that can have multi factor authentication built in right then and there. That way, they could create that one time use token and use it right then and there versus having something sent to their phone where if it's something critical to banking, your GitHub, they know that they can figure out who the cell phone provider is for this person and then go and try to socially engineer, take over that account and get access to the keys to the kingdom because they already use a common password somewhere else.
Yeah, social engineering is exactly how the MGM cyber breach happened. When you hear about that and you research the story, I just shake my head. I'm like, if you just followed your procedures that I know you have, would have never happened. You'd have saved billions of dollars. People do think it's too difficult, too time consuming and whatnot. But I think to myself, exactly what you said, I didn't have it. So I started digging around and I actually found on Google a like a page that looked like it should have been taken off the internet, where all I had to do was give it my email address that I ordered from and the order date and my zip
Mhm.
code. And it gave me the order number. And then I went in and I put the order number in and boom, I found out what was going on. Well, when I was talking to their support about it, he says, how did you get the order number if you didn't get the email? And so I told him about that page. And I said, and I strongly suggest you take that page down because I was able to use commonly available. The only thing that probably wouldn't have been commonly available is the date I placed the order, but everything else is commonly available information. I worked as with a restaurant delivery service. It was my first CTO gig. And we had bought this software from a gentleman and we had the source code. And so he called me one day and he said, I need you to help me with something. I have this back door that when I disable somebody, I log in with this password and somehow they knew the password and they changed it. And I said, tell me your password is clock123. He goes, how do you know that? I said, because it's in the area of the code where you define a bunch of constants. And it's the only password you use. And yes, I understand that only admin does it, but I said, let me ask you a question. Have they ever called you and said they had a problem with their menu and they needed to rebuild it and you gave them the password over the phone? He said, yeah, there you go. That's how they know the password because you told it to them and you embedded it in the code. And you make a great point about the two-factor authentication needing to be convenient because if I have a deadline and I need to get money to somebody and I'm trying to get into the bank and then I got to go to another app or wait for a text to come, all this stuff, well, that's quite secure for the most part. It's still a pain in my butt to try to get across the finish line the thing I'm trying to do. So I love authenticator apps. I think that's one great way to do it because you've got your code right there and you just type it in. But yeah, you're right. I think some kind of one-time use token. That's why I think a lot of people these days, especially communities, like community software, they won't even let you log in with a password. You give them your email address, they shoot you over a one-time link to log in. You get in, you use it, you close your browser, can't get back there again. I love that. But at the same time, what stops someone from walking into my office, sitting down at my desk, making that request, logging in and stealing everything from me in there? There's got to be a better way.
Mentioned there that they send you an email with that one time token. But if you've already done your research on the individual, you're likely also targeting their email account. So
Right.
if everything's in the email account, your username, your password, and then your one time link, sure, it only allows them one time in, but that one time could be enough to steal hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, depending on the individual. Um, One of the things that I like with these authenticator and password managers is the use of passphrases, where it creates a custom passphrase for that browser, for that application. And it's only used then and there by that password manager. And that's something that I love. Outlook started doing it where each phone or each browser required a separate passphrase just for that application. And that allows you to install your email on a phone, a totally separate. And I think something like that could be another convenient way to do it. Google allows you to do it as well. So look into those ways that you can really segregate the access to your different critical applications in a convenient way.
No, I agree. I think convenience is important, but you can't sacrifice security for convenience either. There's some things I've had people ask me that, like, why did you put a password on my laptop? It's easier if there's no password. Yeah, you got company data on there, man. There's going to be a password on your laptop. And then sure enough, one of the owners goes to Mexico with his laptop, leaves it in a taxi cab, and never gets his laptop back. They would have access to the VPN. I raised the radar and made sure that there weren't issues, but it's just simple stuff. Your insights are really interesting. You're about the third or fourth cybersecurity expert, we'll call it, that I've had on the show. And all three of you have commonalities, but I can tell that there's like personal touches to this stuff, things that you feel the most comfortable with, because everybody's had different answers to different things. So the last thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap up is, could you tell me about a time when something like seemingly like a small oversight led to a significant security challenge?
Living in Florida, you experience hurricanes. And in preparing for hurricanes, you often have to shut down and rebuild your environment. And planning for that is very critical. One of the organizations that I worked with, they hadn't been through such a disaster. And we were planning for 4 days on how to properly shut down, document, and restart the infrastructure because their headquarters was in Florida. And at the time, they needed to shut down everything, ensure the equipment was at least 2 feet off the floor, which allowed for up to 4 feet of flooding. And these are things that they didn't take into consideration when they were building out the environment. And as we prepared for this disaster, it felt like everything was rushing down to the finish line. So, what I would say is don't let these things happen last minute. Plan for them, test them. A hurricane allows a lot of time for planning, a tornado doesn't. If you live anywhere in the United States close to a tornado alley in the Midwest, make sure that you plan your disaster recovery and you test it, because a tornado happens like that. And if you're not properly planned for switching over to another site, you could lose your business overnight.
Thank you so much for that information. Why don't you let people know how they can connect with you?
CPF-coaching.com. Try to keep it very simple. I also have a Substack where I have a newsletter and people can subscribe and keep up to date with latest tips and tricks, as well as things that they can do to create a resilient security program.
I'll make sure to drop a link to the subscription for that on the screen so that people can go there. Thanks again for your time to listeners. Appreciate it too. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And make sure you follow Mike and subscribe, share it with others, because that's how we can have a resilient program, by everyone being aware and alert to what they need to do.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. New episodes every Wednesday on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Hope you have a great week and hope to see you back here next Wednesday for another great episode.